Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today. My name is Rathin Sinha. I'm the founder of JOBfindah Network and the speaker for today's webinar, Understanding OFCCP Requirements for Recruiting and How to Be Compliant. For the past 15-20 years, I've been involved with OFCCP compliance for internet recruiting. After a few years building the e-commerce business for Monster.com, I led the transition of the Department of Labor's America's Job Bank program to create and lead America's Job Exchange. It was the pioneering commercial venture solely focused on OFCCP compliance. So in 2016, I founded the next generation OFCCP compliance solution, JOBfindah, to assist medium and large enterprises in their OFCCP compliance and diversity recruiting efforts. So every day I am asked to explain the compliance obligations of federal contractors for diversity outreach and for recruiting and affirmative action for their internet recruiting. What are the regulations a federal contractor or subcontractor must comply with, and what it needs to do to comply? How to be prepared for an OFCCP audit, and what are the consequences for non-compliance? So I hope in this webinar, and it is an educational webinar, so I can cover some of these items and hopefully bring some useful information for you. Once again, I truly appreciate you all joining today and hope to make this use of time useful for you. I also hope that you all can hear me. Let me know if you don't. You are going to be on mute, so please use the question box on the side of the screen to let us know if you have any questions or comments. But before we move on too far, I just wanted to go through some logistics. So please use the link in your invite to join the webinar. Use your computer audio or use a phone to call in. The number is shown here, 631-992-3221. And the conference pin is 893-917-847. It's also in the invite that you received. Again, recording and the presentation will be sent to you by tomorrow. Just to make sure you get all our emails, you add these two addresses, contact@jobfindah.com and webinars@jobfindah.com in your safe sender list. Also, the webinar is approved for 1 hour credit by the HRCI. Please submit questions, as I said before, and you can also follow up with me on questions. I will try to answer all the questions at the end or via follow-up email. So with that, another thing I wanted to make sure that, what I'm saying today, it is really for educational purposes. I'm also not trying to sell anything to you, although I am talking on behalf of JOBfindah, which provides this service. But most importantly, the material is just for this webinar. It's not legal advice. It's not business advice. Just consult, with your counsel or advisor if you take any actions just based on this. So now as we start, we are going to cover today, hopefully, and tell me if you want to change anything. What is the OFCCP and why is it important? Obviously, we want to talk about that. What are the regulations related to recruiting? We want to know that. How to comply with the regulations with ease. So obviously, you don't want to spend a lot of time and money, just complying with the regulations. You have a business to run. And then how to ensure success in case of an audit. And most importantly, for many of you, how to leverage OFCCP compliance for diversity. So hopefully we can cover all of that. But before we start dive into it, I just want your permission to go off camera, so that way I'm not distracting you. And also that gives me a little bit room and ease to move around and have a good presentation. So I'm just going to go off camera. I would come back again for the Q&A session. And for now, let's focus on the material. So each year, the federal government, it pays out hundreds of billions of dollars for goods and services it purchases from various private sector companies. Doing business with the government, it can be very lucrative, but it also imposes a significant burden requiring compliance with several complex laws and regulations that may impact one's business operations. Such regulations can be, requirements for, how to hire people, how to pay them, how to retain them. We just had a webinar on pay equity, so that's an important issue also. But hiring, recruiting is a major item for federal contractors for compliance. That is because the federal government, it holds the contractors to a very high standard of non-discrimination and equal employment opportunity obligations, and it requires them to comply. The underlying principle that guides this regulation is that all these employment opportunities from the perspective of the federal government, that these employment opportunities by the federal contractors are being generated by federal dollars, which are really taxpayer dollars. And it should be available to all Americans on an equitable and fair basis. So with that premise, let's get started. Now, the first and foremost question is, who is a federal contractor? So when I speak with many, of my clients or other HR or TA professionals, a lot of them say, we don't know whether we are really a federal contractor, and so on and so forth. So it's really difficult to determine if a company is a federal contractor simply by looking at its size, its industry or products or services. Businesses, obviously, businesses that hold a purchase agreement from a federal department, an agency, or a person, they are federal contractors, obviously. But businesses that receive federal funds for construction projects, or universities that receive federal contracts or research grants, banks that receive federal insurance, the FDIC insurance for deposits, healthcare providers that receive reimbursement for services like Medicare or something like that, or drugs. They are also federal contractors. And moreover, an organization that does not directly have a contract with the federal government, but instead they provide goods and services to a federal contractor in fulfilling their federal contracts. So that's important. Just because you are working for, say, Boeing or some defense contractor doesn't make you a subcontractor. But if you are actually working on projects that are under federal contract for the federal contractor. So anyway, I think the point is the subcontractors are also, for our purposes, of federal contractors. So again, coming back, these contractors and subcontractors, they supply a vast array of goods and services directly or indirectly to the federal agencies. And they hail from all sorts of industries. So the important thing is, and what is quite interesting, it's quite common, actually. It's not uncommon, let's put it that way, for HR and recruiting professionals in a company not to even know that they are federal contractors or they have federal contracts, because oftentimes these contracts are secured by salespeople. They're signed by, the contracts are signed by legal. I mean, they're manufactured and delivered by the operational team. The payments are paid by, or collected by the accounting. But HR and recruiting may not even be in the loop. So I really suggest, and we'll get to that, because at the end it is the obligation of the contractor to know if they are federal contractor or not, and then take appropriate actions. So fortunately, there are tools that where you can find out what is happening with your company. Is your business, is it a federal contractor? I mean, even if you are not, check it out, because it's free. So there are two websites. One is a Federal Procurement Data System, fpds.gov. Just go and type out your company's name and see whether anything comes up. If it does, it will show you what kind of contracts you got, when you got it, how much the money is, and so on and so forth. And I think over time, this particular website is being transitioned to also another website, the government database called sam.gov, I think Uncle Sam. And you can find that too. You require, I think, an account. It's a free account, obviously, with the government. But the point is, it's important to double check. And also, this is something I find personally very useful, because oftentimes your business's name is not the name you know. It may be a subsidiary, or like really the parent company which got the contract is some other name. So it kind of gives you a sense of where your business is, gives you some ability, some visibility to the company name, the structure, and so on. It's very useful. If you haven't used it, it gives you comfort to know whether you are using contractor compliance or not using, but at least you know you are doing the right thing. So before I go too far, the next thing we want to come back, and this is, everybody has heard about them, but really what it is, we should know. There are really big three, I call them big three regulations. These are the three areas where this affirmative action, an equal opportunity, that comes up. One, they have very fancy names and numbers. One is called Executive Order 11246. All it really says it's an equal opportunity and affirmative action. So what is affirmative action? Affirmative action is taking that proactive leap to go for these people, going that extra mile to help them come to your company, give them employment in your business. So this Executive Order 11246, in 1965, President Johnson, he signed EO 11246. It establishing non-discrimination, obviously, in federal contractors' hiring and employment practices. So first is non-discrimination, obviously, but this legislation also prohibits federal contractors and federally assisted construction contractors and subcontractors who do over $10,000, any kind of number of employees, just doing $10,000 of government business in a year. It prohibits from discriminating in employment decisions based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. Now, the next phase is, so first is non-discrimination. The second phase is doing affirmative action. And what is affirmative action? Affirmative action, it requires contractors to take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and that employees are treated fairly during employment without regard to their race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. So under this executive order, contractors with 50 or more employees and a annual contract value of 50,000 or more must also have a written affirmative action plan. So first, you are non-discriminating. Second, you are obviously non-discriminating, but you are also having a written plan that is going that extra mile, going proactively to help hire those underrepresented people in your company. And not only the plan, and then implement it in good faith to increase the participation of underrepresented minorities and women in the workplace. So 11246 is all about minorities and women. But then another significant legislation then that promotes equal opportunity in the workforce is Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So what it is, it was signed by President Nixon, and this law prohibits federal contractors and subcontractors from discriminating against individuals with disabilities. So it's not about being gender, like male, female, or race and all that. It's across the board, individuals with disabilities, and requires employers to take affirmative action to improve the employment of such individuals. So specifically, so if you are less than $15,000, so before you were $10,000 of contract, now if you are $15,000 or more of federal contract, then you must not discriminate. But then it goes more, just like before, if it is more than $50,000 in a year, or with a workforce of 50 or more employees, you must also have a prepared written AAP, affirmative action plan for disability, and act upon it in good faith. And remember, when talking about disability, we are talking about both physical and mental impairment, because they both are considered in determining a person with a disability. Any impairment that impacts a person's, say, eyesight, say, hearing, speech, ability to walk, breathe, talk, or perform manual tasks, take care of oneself, and learning are considered to be within the scope of the regulation. So the Americans with Disabilities Act, that ADA, it has expanded the definition of a person with disability to even include people with cancer, diabetes, and chronic depression. So it's actually a very, very big thing. And in the last few years, the OFCCP has gone, very, very aggressively in implementing and enforcing these ADA stipulations. And then finally, and this is something a lot of people have heard of and they continuously talk about. So this is in 1974, Congress passed the Vietnam era Veterans Readjustment Assistance Act. It's lovingly known as VEVRA. It requires that employers provide equal opportunity and affirmative action to Vietnam era veterans, special disabled veterans, and veterans who served on active duty during a war or in a campaign or expedition for which a campaign badge has been authorized. So without getting into too much into it, basically for protected veterans, you've got to have a program of non-discrimination, but more importantly, a program for affirmative action to increase their employment in your company. And unlike Executive Order 11246, where the threshold was 50 employees and 50,000 annual order value, here it is 150,000 in a given year, and contractors with more than 50 employees. So today, the scope of VEBRA has actually expanded. It applies to any veteran who served on active duty during a war, including Vietnam War, Gulf War, and so on and so forth. But so these three things, regulations, are what you really want to do. What you want to do? You want to make sure that there is non-discrimination in the recruiting process. And then you want to make sure there is affirmative action. That means you are taking proactive measures to increase employment of those groups of traditionally underrepresented people. They could be women, they could be minorities, they definitely could be people with disabilities and veterans. And you got to do non-discrimination if you're a contractor or a subcontractor or taking grants. And more importantly, if you are 50 plus employees, and if you are doing either 50,000 or 150,000, you got to have a written affirmative action plan. So saying that, these are regulations. So who enforces them? So we're coming back to the basic question. So the enforcement is done by the OFCCP. What is OFCCP? The Office of Federal Contractor Compliance Programs. It is responsible for enforcement of these regulations. It is a part of the Department of Labor, and obviously it oversees not just this OFCCP compliance, it oversees recruiting practice of federal contractors and subcontractors, and ensures that the contractual promise of affirmative action and equal opportunity is upheld. So what is contractual promise? So when you are getting a federal contract, you would see in that contract language, it specifically says some of these items that we are talking about. So that is a part of the contract. That's a contractual promise of working with the federal government. So you are actually doing those things. So through audits and investigations, the OFCCP uncovers, your compliance or your deficiencies, if any, and it takes the required corrective actions. And that corrective actions could be many different kinds, including penalties, and it can even be disbarment. So and we have seen in the past few years there have been a lot of penalties and all that. But more importantly, it is very important for as a federal contractor to have these things done properly, because it also involves your brand name, your ability to hire people, and all of that. So, but the OFCCP really enforces it. And one thing is very important. It must be noted that the responsibility lies with the contractor to be aware of the OFCCP requirements and develop the capabilities and resources to discharge these responsibilities and fulfill their obligations appropriately. So don't let somebody tell you, okay, we'll take care of it, you'll be all good and fine and audits and everything. Obviously people can help you, but at the end of the day, it is the responsibility of the contractor to learn about it, to be aware of it, and to act on it, right? So to help the federal contractors better understand the regulatory requirements and processes, you don't have to just rely on people like me. I mean, OFCCP offers huge sort of technical assistance, and they maintain really, really helpful information on its website. These resources are a great place to learn about regulations and monitor changes. Obviously, we help. We are part of the process. We try to help you all. But these resources are a great place. It's often worthwhile to sign up for the newsletters and so on. I mean, one of the areas I personally use a lot is called ofccptraining.dol.gov. You can just go there, and there's a lot of material. You have more material than time available, but these are good resources. So anyway, so part of this is, as part of its role of enforcement, as the enforcement body, the OFCCP conducts periodic compliance reviews. So commonly, and they are known as compliance audits, and the OFCCP does it to ensure that federal contractors are compliant. So during an audit, the OFCCP examines whether a federal contractor is taking appropriate affirmative action to improve employment of the underrepresented job seeker groups. Are they providing reasonable accommodations to individuals with disabilities? Are they ensuring that all applicants have an equal opportunity, equal employment opportunity without regard to race, color, religion, gender, or national origin? In short, a compliance audit is a comprehensive review of a company's hiring and employment practices, including a review of its written affirmative action plan. So, a compliance review and audit can be broad. uh, and the thing is, the OFCCP requires the contractors to maintain documentation of its hiring practices and records of their good faith effort. So remember, the AAP, the affirmative action plan, is a commitment to have a good faith effort, good faith implementation of this affirmative action objectives and the activities. So the OFCCP requires that not only that you do it, but you also keep documentation and records of this good faith effort, and those are for job postings and outreach activities and so on. So as part of the compliance review, the OFCCP may do an off-site review, which is the name of the game today, right? Everything is virtual. So they would ask you for documentation and this and that. These are the commonly known as desk audit. So requesting only documentation and support data instead of conducting a more detailed and thorough on-site visit to review your facilities and personnel files. And they can also interview your employees, not just current employees, but also past employees. So they have a lot of power to really, really do thorough investigation in these practices. Now, there is really no process. They can do it any way they want. But typically, the compliance review process, it follows very standard steps. The first and foremost, the OFCCP may send out a sort of a pre-audit notification. It's like via corporate scheduling announcement list, CSAL, and to inform an individual, a company, or an establishment, a location, that they may be audited. Obviously, for the last few years, they have been putting it on the internet, so people can just go and find out if they're in the list, in addition to all other notifications. Now, if you're included in that list, is generally followed by a formal scheduling letter that confirms an audit and requests a response to some of the issues raised by the OFCCP. The contractor needs to respond to that scheduling letter. Generally, I think it's within 30 days, although because of the pandemic, there had been some extra time allowed. But normally, you've got to respond as a contractor to the letter within 30 days. And then after that, after you respond, the OFCCP will inform you what the next steps are. And the next steps could be many. Based on the response, OFCCP may decide to move forward with a desk audit, or they may not. They may be satisfied. Or the desk audits are where most audits actually end up for resolution. And then it can continue for multiple rounds of this data requests and response, and it can continue for a long time. Now, finally, based on the outcome of the desk audit, the OFCCP may decide to opt for an on-site audit. Obviously, that's much more thorough, in which case an interview with all the employees and facility tours and review of job posting and outreach, all of these can be conducted. Now, as I said before, OFCCP doesn't really have to follow these steps. They can interject new steps or skip one or two, but in general, this is the typical process. Now, after the review, there are really two fundamental outcomes. So if there's no violation, they don't uncover anything, then it's great. The contractor requests no further action, and the OFCCP will issue a closure letter. I think most likely, that's often called as letter of compliance. If, however, the OFCCP identifies violation, it may pursue corrective action in many forms. The first step usually is issuing a conciliation agreement, and it kind of outlines a specific set of remedial activities, and for like 12 months or 24 months to rectify the violations. Sometimes the contractor may also be instructed to initiate or increase outreach to specific groups. They might say, you are doing fine, but your disability compliance is not adequate, so you should do more of that. Or, if you're a manufacturing plant somewhere, hire more female, or something like that. So in those cases, there are very specific set of actions you can act upon. In some instances, the OFCCP may opt for monitoring. They may require contractors to provide regular updates on how the remedial activities are going on. And if the violations are severe, the OFCCP, as I said, they may decide to seek litigation. Depending on individual case, they may even pursue penalties or debarment and all that. So this is all great. I mean, a little bit scary, obviously, but the point is now the real question is how federal contractors can fulfill their obligations. I think that's really the important thing. So to meet the compliance requirements, as I mentioned or alluded before, federal contractors must engage in good faith recruiting activities. There's like a term for this. It's like GFE, good faith efforts. Now, one thing I find, with many clients and prospective clients, they kind of assume that this is just job posting on job boards. But really, good faith efforts are not merely job posting on job boards, but it must also include targeted outreach to various local organizations that can assist these underrepresented groups in getting the job openings. So the whole thought process is obviously the job boards are there. And if job boards are working fantastic, then we won't need affirmative action. There should not be underrepresented in the first place. So there's a twist in this job posting thing. So we'll learn a little bit more about what job postings they're looking at. And also, there have been studies and they have shown that most recruiting for most positions are local. Despite all this internet, all this remote and everything, hiring is primarily local. So they want contractors to tap into these local organizations to get applicants. Because who are these local organizations? Now, these are diverse set of organizations who are helping underrepresented groups. Now, they can be minorities, refugees, seniors, women, veterans, people with disability, all of these people. They provide often, they are training, counseling, help in getting jobs. So these intermediaries are actually a great source of the target audience that who are underrepresented. So when we talk about good faith effort, we really talk about job posting, but also this outreach. Obviously, the outcome of this outreach are going to be different for different organizations, different kind of jobs. But it is very important to keep in mind that recruiting with this kind of twist is really what we need to do to make sure we are doing a proper good faith effort. So for fulfilling the obligations of Executive Order 11246, let's just take a step back and say, okay, what do we have to do? So what we have to do, kind of a combination of things. Number one, we got to have an affirmative action plan, right? Provided we are 50 plus and we have $50,000 and more contract. So the first step, you've got to have an affirmative action plan.
Once you have an affirmative action plan, then you are acting on that of affirmative action plan in good faith. And for 11 to 46, the good faith is outreach to women and minorities. So how you are doing outreach? Multiple ways. Number one, job posting on just job sites targeting women and minorities. And there is, people get too much hung up on, which sites, how many sites, and so on. I think the important thing is really starting somewhere and then testing them and expanding on them and tweaking them. But the first step is going for job boards which are small niche job boards. They are targeting women and minorities. Then job distribution to the state and CBO. CBO is community-based organization who are supporting women and minorities. And then go beyond just job posting and distribution. Go for local outreach to women and minorities events, training, and so on and so forth. But most importantly, keep documentation of all these activities, of these job postings, of the distribution, and so on. And in addition, there are other things, like you got to make sure your job postings specifically say EEO, a statement that you do not, you do not discriminate, you hire based without regard to, race, gender, and all that stuff. So you do that. And very similarly for the Rehabilitation Act, very similar things. You got to have diverse, affirmative action plan. You got to do job posting on niche job sites which are targeting, individuals with disability. You are doing job distribution to the CBOs who are serving people with disability, events, local linkages, sponsorship, and again, keep the documentation. Make sure you have EEO statement. Make sure you are collecting voluntary data and when they are applying for the job or when you are recruiting or even during their employment, that what kind of disability they have, what kind of gender, what kind of race they have. It's voluntary, obviously, but you got to have specific efforts for that. And finally, for people disability hiring, you also have a national benchmark. So it's like you got to set yourself a target. It's not a quota, but it's a target for you that your workforce should have at least 7% of people should have some sort of disability they have disclosed. So again, as I said, these are some of the activities you have to do, and it is not always easy to have people disclose their disability. So people take a lot of innovative ideas and a lot of things. You can do it multiple times. But the point is, you got to know where you stand. You got to know how is the composition of your workforce relative to the people available to your community. Is there any broad-based or any specific difference between what is available in the market and what is your workforce, and whether you have the information to substantiate that. And for Vevra, again, very similar. You got to have an affirmative action plan. You got to do the outreach specifically for those veterans for job posting, job distribution, your local linkage, outreach, events. But one very specific and very important difference for Vevra is that you also have to post the jobs on the state job board. So every state, so when I did that transition from America's Job Bank to America's Job Exchange in 2007, the biggest change was, before that, AJB, there was a website where people could post their jobs, and that's a national website, and that takes care of this Vevra. And it was free and it was government. But now the big difference is, since 2007, every state has its own website. So if your job is in, say, wherever, say Reston, Virginia, you got to post that job in Virginia. If the job is in, Indiana, another town in Indiana, you got to post it in Indiana. So it is a little bit more complex, and the location of the job becomes important. So that's why the regulation says in the appropriate website, state website, but you have to post that job. And you really have to maintain an account, you have to post the job, and oftentimes in your audits, you would be asked to show that you have actually posted that job. So it's very important to keep a copy of that, proof, because you are audited, 2-3 years down the road. How would you show that the job was posted? So oftentimes it's a good idea to keep a screenshot of that job posting just to show that. So very similar sort of activities, but for veterans, there is this extra activity you have to do. And as I mentioned before, for veterans, you also have a hiring benchmark. Every year that benchmark changes. It has been between 5 to 7.5% for the past several years. Fortunately, the veteran hiring has improved. I think the benchmark right now is about 5.6%. Just make sure that you are on track in terms of your workforce composition being in that benchmark. So I think the whole thing of doing this, and we can go through some examples just to explain it a little bit more. I don't want to spend a lot of time, and I might draw some examples from our JOBfindah services, but I'm not going to talk about JOBfindah here. But I wanted to just use that as an example. So here, when I go here, so it says like, first is job posting. Remember we talked about it's a multi-pronged approach. The job posting is to reach and attract diverse underrepresented groups. So as we talked about, you got to post your jobs on niche job boards, and they could be for veterans. They should be for veterans, for individuals with disability, for women, for minorities. LGBTQ was a very important area. It is still obviously blacks, Hispanics, as many minority groups you can slice and dice, the better it is. And obviously don't forget the broad-based general audience. In fact, you should also try to post, and it is part of your recruiting strategy most cases, send them to job aggregators. One good advantage of aggregator is, although they do not share exactly where a job has gone, but they have a broad network where the jobs have gone. So again, the idea is to distribute your job to every nook and corner, or as much as possible, instead of just a broad brush approach to large job boards. But then also for mandatory job posting, as we talked about, post the job on the state job bank. So this is around job posting. Similarly, if we go, there are some examples of what kind of job boards we post your jobs, whether for veterans or disability and women and so on. And similarly, also the capabilities that how from one job, how we can distribute them to other job boards. I mean, there may be fees attached to that based on which job boards and so on, but you can do that. And it's a little bit discretionary in the sense that you have a budget and so on and so forth. But the important thing is that you are posting your jobs in a good faith to the diverse population where you are doing affirmative action. And then the third piece, which is a very important piece for veterans, VEVRA, that you are posting the job on the state-run job board. Every state, including the territories, have their own job board, and we have to post the jobs there. And it's actually quite a bit of process, because these job boards, although they are free, maintaining your accounts, they do verification. Your job postings need to be in a certain way. They literally would go through each job, verify the job, and so on. So it's a little bit more work, but the important thing is these jobs are actually, once they are posted, they're held in sort of for veterans. So it's called veterans hold, because once the job is posted for the first 24 hours, only veterans will have access to these jobs. So, this is how I think the government has, implemented a process to give exclusive access of work employment opportunities to the veterans. And it's part of the regulation, and this is what we're going to do. And similarly, the job distribution, as we talked about. So the government, every state has this American job centers. These are the local workforce centers. What is so unique about the centers? Not only they help people, underrepresented people, with job search and counseling and so on, they also have designated, most of them also have designated veteran employment representatives. So this LVAR, it basically means local veteran employment representative. DVOP is Disabled Veteran Opportunity Program. So I think point is you got to send these job opportunities to these people who are helping veterans find employment. So this is part of your outreach, part of your distribution. Similarly, not just for veterans, as we talked about local organizations. So you have to send those jobs there, as we talked about. And finally, that affirmative action targeting. So based on, suppose your company is lacking female engineers or something like that, then obviously you got to have more effort, more outreach to those particular groups. So, and that is the feedback you are getting from your affirmative action plan. Similarly, so how do we do that? Obviously, these are not job postings. So we would post the jobs on our sites, but just like job alerts or something like that, these things would be geo-targeted way. They would, based on the location of your job, they would go to the right people, the DevOps, the LVERs, the states, so on and so forth, so that these jobs are going to these people. Hopefully, these are being acted upon by all of them, and they are being used in all cases uniformly. And these are getting the exposure they need to give you candidates, veterans and otherwise, for your job postings. But this is the activity we have to do for the American Job Centers, for the local diversity organizations. And when you talk about local diversity organizations, there are also many different kinds. I mean, at least for us, we know we give about a dozen different kinds, from veteran centers, for disability organizations, for women's support, for, religious support, and so on and so forth. So as diverse as you want to be, and you want to go. So this distribution is part of your outreach. And then also, you can do additional outreach, even if they are not part of the standard solution. Like for us, I know we provide tools so our customers can directly do outreach to local organizations. But also you can document your activities of events and career fairs and everything, because these are also part of your outreach. It's a very myopic view to think about recruiting as just being job posting. So it's job posting, it's outreach, and outreach can also be, this daily notice of job listings, but also other things. So all of these things should be included. And then you got to have proper documentation for that. Because God forbid, if you are audited, you might be audited, 3 years down the road or 2 years down the road. You want to make sure you have the documentation then to show OFCCP what you did 3 years ago. So it's very important to keep your job posting reports, distribution reports, your outreach activities in a fashion and way where they are stored safely, and also you can retrieve them to show if and during an audit. And for that, so we obviously from JOBfindah, we offer a kind of a dashboard where all this stuff is stored, and you can easily just click of a button, you can pull the reports out from wherever time you want and so on. That can help you sail through an audit. But even if you are doing it yourself, you got to be able to have that and access that. So all sorts of reports, job posting history, actually job by job, you should have report, because sometimes OFCCP will come back not just by location or time period. They might just go for 5 different jobs. So it's very important to see job by job exactly what was done, what is there, and you've got to have those reports with links and everything there for you. So the point is, at the end, to do this, 3 things to remember in my mind: the 3 regulations, then those outreach activities, obviously in addition to affirmative action plan and those things, those outreach activities which are consisting of job posting, job distribution, and local outreach, one-off, and then keep them in reports and documentation. So if you are audited, you can demonstrate that not only you have put those things in your plan, but you have actually acted on that. And that is really the whole purpose of this exercise. Now, obviously, to do it effectively, you also need some other capabilities, like you got to have some automated job posting capability. Otherwise, you'll be spending hours posting jobs in all these niche sites and distributing them to local outreach and keeping reports and all that. But you got to have a lot of companies. Some of you have good technology resources or people, and they can do and keep a tab on that. But you need those things, and obviously you got to build internal knowledge. I mean, just you've got to not build knowledge about your business, but also some of these regulations and how to navigate through that to be able to be successful. So, obviously, for many companies who can afford, and most of you actually can probably afford, when you look at that overall cost, to let others do that for you. The OFCCP actually permits contractors to outsource these activities. And one thing to keep in mind, the OFCCP does not endorse or recommend any specific vendor. I mean, the whole reason, if somebody tells you, oh, we are recommended by OFCCP, that they are really not telling you the truth, because no matter whom you hire, the burden of compliance, it lies with the contract, with you, the contractor, not the third party. The third party is an accessory. They are helping you get compliant, but the burden is with you. Obviously, the third parties are of great value for companies like JOBfindah or others, but they can take up the workload, and they can take up the workload from you at a fraction of the cost you would be spending, simply because they are doing it day in, day out. They have processes around it, they have technology behind it, and so on. And also, one intangible thing that you get from third parties is that they bring expertise. They know what OFCCP is looking for, how to navigate that without having to, struggle there. So, using third parties is, in general, for most companies, it's a good option. And they are it really helps them kind of navigate this piece of their whole overall HR and recruiting effort. But again, you got to be very careful when you evaluate and engage third parties. Obviously, everybody is in business. They want to sell you more than you need. They want to charge you more than you should be paying. They want to lock you in for longer than you should be, and all of that. But anyway, that's part of the business. Just be careful, evaluate with them. I think at the end, what really it boils down to, how much they take care of you, how much you work with them, how much they treat you as your partner. So as I said again, because these activities are kind of disparate, and they are not exactly the normal flow for most of you, but when you hire a third party like JOBfindah or somebody, they will actually have a very integrated and automated solution for you, which comes out cheaper if you do a business case or something like that. But again, knowing the regulations and doing the real thing that's important, which is job posting on niche job boards, job posting on the state job boards, distribution to the American job centers and local organizations, and keeping reports. Those things are important. No matter what it is, you have to do it, But I'm glad that you gave me this time that we could cover the regulations, cover who is impacted, cover what must be done, and how to do it. And if you don't want to do it yourself, to let you know that there are companies who can help you do some of that. With that, let me come back and see if there are any questions. I don't know how to give you ability to speak, but let me just go through this a little bit. There are questions about when will there be slides. I would try to send them out by tomorrow. If not, you'd get it by Thursday or Friday. I know it's Thanksgiving, but you should get it before. Somebody also had a question. I cannot find a job posting site for NJ. That's New Jersey. There is one. Actually, if you just go do an internet search, or you just come to our JOBfindah.com, you would find a link to a map that basically takes you to any of the state websites. You can go there. Otherwise, just follow up with us. We will show you where to get that. What is an example of local sponsorship? Yeah, I mean, the local sponsorships can be many. Oftentimes, what I have seen that these local workforce centers, they do job fairs, or they do training sessions, and they also actually you can get free access to host your job sessions and so on. So that's actually a good one. It doesn't cost that much money. It gives you good access to the workforce center. Otherwise, there are job fairs, there are virtual training sessions, and so on and so forth. But do something locally. Oftentimes people do that through universities, so they might do a hiring event with I'm just throwing some, nothing specific, like say Black engineers, they do a evening of presentation and maybe like a cocktail hour or something like that. And actually in the JOBfindah platform, you have tools where you can record those interactions. You can literally just enter like, well, we had a evening networking sessions with the Black engineers in local this college or this technical high school, and then we met 55 people, we collected 50 resumes, we spoke with 10 people. In 2 months, we interviewed, and maybe we ended up hiring. Or even if you don't hire, these activities, you can record those, and those are great things to show if you are an audited, or just for your overall recruiting program. So I think this is there is a lot of opportunity. Don't get stuck into just job posting and distribution. I think your objective is really to do a good faith effort that drives recruiting for you, but that also fulfills the obligation, because what you are trying to do is really tied with your overall recruiting and overall diversity recruiting. The cost of doing OFCCP, the federal contractor, is you're doing it in a very structured way. And there are people, like our company or others who are probably, they can help you. If I wanted to kind of, end it there. I think I'm right on time. And if you have any questions, do write to me. We would love to hear from you. And if not anything, I want to wish all of you a very happy Thanksgiving. Have a safe one. Have fun. I know after the pandemic, this Thanksgiving feels very special. So do travel wherever you need to go and have fun. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you. Thank you.